Hello and welcome back to another flute tip of the week. Yeah, it's gone again. Been sick the last couple of days, but life must go on, work must go on, and the internet never stops. This week we're going to have a bit of a change of pace. I will very often do some minor emergency repairs for my friends if they're about to go into a concert or they're going into rehearsal and find something has happened to their flutes. I thought that today would be a good day to talk about emergency maintenance on the piccolo, and I will explain why. Get comfortable doing small maintenance on your instrument so that in an emergency situation you can keep calm and tweak it so that it works again. Understanding and getting control of the thickness of the corks of your piccolo is good for your understanding of how your screws work on your flute, because it is the same concept of how the instrument works. It's all about the distance between the keys and the way that they connect so that they can seal the holes properly. And while the mode is changed from screws to corks, it is the same principle. And I think it's a lot easier to be able to do this by experimenting with your piccolo thickness, where you're able to use corks of different thicknesses or folding pieces of paper to see how thick it needs to be, and then transferring that knowledge to the flute where it's a lot more nitpicky. I wanted to do this video because of a few conversations I've had with keef piccolos over the years. Since I got my keef, I have not been in a place where I'm able to send it back to them so that it can get overhauled every year or so, which means that some of the corks have gotten thinner over time. I have had different balance issues that are just a part of the piccolo growing older along with you as you play it lots. But I'm also traveling a lot, which means that I don't always have access to a repair person should I suddenly spring a leak. I had worked in a flute maintenance shop for a while, but I never had the chance to work with piccolos. And so this one time when I did have a leak in my piccolo, I decided to call keef so that I could speak with one of the people who actually works on the piccolos so they could talk me through doing a minor repair. And the thing that they got me to use was a Post-it note. You see, overall, you wouldn't need to completely remove the cork to add something to make it a little bit thicker. You would just need to add a little bit of paper or some folded cigarette paper to add just a little more thickness so that it can balance out. The problem is, depending on which keys the cork affects, and also the thicknesses of paper you have available, you don't always have the perfect thickness of paper to be able to add that extra bit of distance. And in this case, I had already tried putting in a few layers of cigarette paper. I even tried putting in a piece of paper from the cover flap for my powder paper, and nothing was quite thick enough. And the key it was affecting was the long B flat, which of course meant that I couldn't play anything in the high register. And the problem was right here. Because if I had used, say, a B flat with the thumb, it wouldn't set all the way back down. And this was because the cork on the underside of the paddle had gotten too thin from lots of use. Now, I recently did an adjustment similar to this, so I've taken out my adjustment so I can demonstrate to you the big difference this makes. So I was getting a result like this. Obviously not good for any kind of playing. And I kept experimenting with different thicknesses of cork, and I even experimented with adding a piece of paper to a different cork that was affecting the same kind of keys. So you can see here is the key that the long B flat affects. And there's a cork on the underside of the key that touches it. And so I had thought that maybe this one was the problem. And I was just having a lot of trouble finding something thick enough to have things seal properly, and also something not so thick that it would cause leaks in the lower register because of not being able to seal when one key is reaching the base of the piccolo before another. And so what they got me to do was take out a Post-it note. Now, what's great about Post-it notes for this kind of repair is that they already have an adhesive. They already have some glue on the top part, which means that you're not going to need to try to find shellac. I wouldn't necessarily recommend crazy glue because that can just go everywhere, and then you got a whole whack of different problems. And the first thing we did was simply put the edge of the Post-it note in between those two keys on the back that I showed first, just to see if that was enough to be able to seal it properly. So just putting it right in here. So you see, that's where the A flat key is, and I'm putting it in between the two paddles right beside that. And we tried that first. Ta-da! It was like from the heavens that suddenly I was able to play up in the top register. And after that, all that needed to be done was to cut it down to the right size. So basically, something like that. Now, one thing that I find really helpful is using tweezers or long-nosed pliers to be able to hold onto the edge of the paper so that you don't have your thick fingers getting in the way and you're able to be a little bit more precise. But the thing to also remember to do is to put it so that the adhesive side is going to be connecting to the metal of the top paddle as opposed to the cork of the bottom one. Because otherwise, it's not going to seal any better, and it takes a lot more kind of glue, shellac, anything to be able to adhere to the cork than it would be to adhere to the metal. Just gonna lift up that top paddle and slide that in. And there we go. Kind of looks really cool as well. And suddenly we're able to play Lieutenant Key J. And it's not just with the B flat key that can work. The whole piccolo is based on that system of the thickness of corks in relation to each other. And it's a domino effect. Another place that you might have to replace the cork, and in this case you would need a piece of cork, would be with these little feet right here. And again, it's a case of the corks wearing down over time. Because not only do they get thinner, but they also start to break down just from exposure to moisture, changes in temperature and humidity, and because this is a mainly wooden instrument, weather patterns really do have a large effect. It's like how if you have a really thin-walled double bass and you go from hot temperature to cold temperature, you're going to get a lot of cracks. So as early as you can, make note of how thick the cork is for little arms like these. Take a picture, because look here, these keys here first need to make contact with this to be able to seal down properly. When the cork is too thin, it means that the key is going to be a bit higher up, because instead of having the thickness of cork to lever it down a bit more, it's going to be raised up above where the other key can connect. Which means that when you first push down the key, you're going to have to make up for the distance that the cork has left behind. And this is where you get your double action from. So again, that tip was get comfortable doing minor maintenance on your instrument so that in an emergency situation, you can keep calm and make the minor tweaks so that you are able to continue playing. I hope you find this week's tip helpful. Keep your eyes open for part 2 of this maintenance video where I will be talking about some specific flute maintenance. So until next week, flute happy, fix happy, and don't be afraid of being more hands-on. Most of my friends know that I have something called fructose malabsorption, which is basically where you can't really eat fructose because it gives you the same kind of reaction as for people who are lactose intolerant. But I very often would forget what I can or can't eat since the list is quite large. So to remind myself, my kitchen is full of the red light, green light system. So it's all over my fridge and even on my cupboards. Thank God I can still eat maple syrup.